Hello everyone, and welcome to lesson 3, where we're going to talk about malicious attacks, threats, and vulnerabilities. So in this chapter, you're going to learn about the software that's used to conduct a malicious attack. This software is called malware. You're going to also learn about different types of attacks. The internet is an untamed new frontier. There are many bad people wanting to steal your data. If your device and sensitive information are connected to the internet, there's a potential for loss or damage. Unlike in your everyday life, in cybersecurity, there is no real law of the land. Criminal acts that lead to destruction and theft occur on a regular basis. These acts affect businesses, individuals, and governments. The criminals often go unpunished, as was the case with the Sony Pictures Entertainment hack that occurred in late 2014. Malicious attacks result in billions of dollars of damages each year. Fortunately, many companies and individuals like you are working hard to protect IT assets from attacks. In this chapter, you're going to learn how to identify security vulnerabilities, protect your organization from threats, and keep your computer safe from malicious attacks. Your learning objective is to describe how malicious attacks, threats, and vulnerabilities impact an IT infrastructure. Some key concepts are malicious software and countermeasures, common attacks and countermeasures, social engineering and how to reduce risks, threats and types of attacks on wireless networks, and threats and types of attacks on web applications. Malicious activity on the rise. So you've probably seen the stories on the news, viewed the humorous ads on TV, or read the headlines about cyber attacks. A case in point, recently authorities sent a college student to prison for 20 years for hacking the email account of a U.S. vice presidential candidate. In a similar incident, clothing retailer TJX Companies admitted to carelessness in allowing the theft of millions of payment card numbers of its customers. In addition, in a humorous primetime commercial, a clueless employee sets off a company-wide virus attack by clicking a harmless email link. Everywhere around you, you find examples of the malicious attacks that security professionals face every day. Headlines are abundant with news of recent data breaches. Data breaches are occurring in the public sector and the private sector. No organization or individual is safe from the risk of stolen digital data or loss of your digital identity. Although these attacks grab the attention of the news media and the public, most victims of cyber attacks don't publicize the incidents at all. Every day, systems around the world are under attack and under threat. In most cases, the only people who ever know about these attacks are security professionals and IT personnel like us. Security professionals are responsible for protecting their systems from threats and for handling malicious attacks when they do occur. One of the most effective ways to protect computer systems is to ensure that vulnerabilities are mitigated throughout the IT infrastructure quickly and efficiently. In your book, there's a table 3.1, and it shows the top 10 hacking countries as identified by Bloomberg Business in April 2013. In 2013, China was the top country of origin for cyber attacks at 41%. The United States was second at 10%. Now remember, the country of origin may be difficult to pinpoint. This is particularly true if botnets are used to perform the actual attack. You can learn more about what a botnet is in your book. So one of the things you have to look at is what it is that you're trying to protect. And the thing that you're trying to protect are assets. An asset is any item that has value. Although all items in an organization have some value, the term asset generally applies to those items that have substantial value. An organization assets can include the following. You have customer data. That's things like names, addresses, phone numbers, social security numbers, date of birth, cardholder ID, protected healthcare information, and things like that. You have IT assets and network infrastructure. This includes hardware, software, and services. You have intellectual property. This includes sensitive data such as patents, source code, formulas, or engineering plans. You have finances and financial data. This includes bank accounts, credit card data, and financial transaction data. You have service availability and productivity, the ability of computing services and software to support productivity for humans and machinery. And finally, you can take a big hit in your reputation. Corporate compliance and brand image can be hurt by a cyber attack. This photo shows the 7 domains of a typical IT infrastructure framework. Components in each domain may connect to a network or to the internet. Threats can exist both internal to the IT infrastructure and external, given that the IT infrastructure is connected to the internet. In popular usage and in media, the term hacker often describes somebody who breaks into a computer system without authorization. In most cases, that means the hacker tries to take control of a remote computer through a network or by software cracking. The media and the general public also use the word hacker to describe anyone accused of using technology for terrorism, vandalism, credit card fraud, identity theft, intellectual property theft, or one of the many other types of crime. In the computing community, the term hacker generally describes a person who enjoys exploring and learning how to modify something, particularly related to computer systems. Hackers, for good or bad, are considered to be experts and tinkerers, but because of the way the media negatively portrays the term, hackers are often the subject of some controversy. Let's look at the different types of hackers and how they're categorized. The first one is the black hat hacker. A black hat hacker tries to break IT security and gain access to systems with no authorization in order to prove technical prowess. They generally develop and use special software tools to exploit vulnerabilities. And they generally exploit holes in systems, and they generally do not attempt to disclose vulnerabilities they find to the administrators of those systems. That's because they want to be able to come back into your system when they want to. Next, you have white hat hackers. A white hat hacker, or what we call an ethical hacker, is an information system security professional who has authorization to identify vulnerabilities and perform penetration testing. Now, the difference between white hat hackers and black hat hackers is that white hat hackers will identify weaknesses for the purpose of fixing them, and black hat hackers find weaknesses just for fun of it or to actually exploit them. And then we have gray hat hackers. A gray hat hacker is a hacker with average abilities who may one day become a black hat hacker, but could also opt to become a white hat hacker. Another common definition is a hacker who will identify but not exploit discovered vulnerabilities, yet may still expect a reward for not disclosing the vulnerability openly. There's no common definition for this type of hacker. Hackers are different from crackers, and that's what a lot of people don't understand about the industry. A cracker has a hostile intent, possess sophisticated skills, and may be interested in financial gain. So really, when you see people talking about that they've been hacked, they really have been attacked by crackers. Now, crackers represent the greatest threat to networks and information resources. These threats usually involve fraud, theft of data, destruction of data, blockage of access, and other malicious activity. Let's take a look at some of the attack tools that these hackers and crackers use. Now, protecting an organization's assets and IT infrastructure requires that you have some idea of how attackers think. Knowing how an attack is conducted and what tools are used will help you build a defense plan. In fact, many organizations use the same tools that attackers use to help identify weaknesses they need to address. It's always better to find weaknesses in your own environment before an attacker does, but it's even more important to quickly remediate those weaknesses. Computer criminals and cyber attackers use a number of hardware and software tools to discover exploitable weaknesses and other tools to perform an actual attack. These tools and techniques can include the following. You have protocol analyzers, or a packet sniffer, they're sometimes called. That's a software program that enables a computer to monitor and capture network traffic, whether on a LAN or a wireless network. A port scanner is a tool used to scan IP host devices for open ports that have been enabled. Think of a port number as a channel commonly associated with a service. OS fingerprint scanners is a software program that allows an attacker to send a variety of packets to an IP host device, hoping to determine the target device's operating system from the responses. A vulnerability scanner is a software program that is used to identify and, when possible, verify vulnerabilities on an IP host device. From this information, a vulnerability scanner compares known software vulnerabilities in its database with what it just found. Exploit software is an application that incorporates known software vulnerabilities, data, and scripted commands to exploit a weakness in a computer system or IP host device. A word dialer is a computer program that dials telephone numbers looking for a computer on the other end. The program works by automatically dialing a defined range of phone numbers. It then logs and enters into a database those numbers that successfully connect to the modem. Next, we have password crackers, and the purpose of password cracking is to uncover a forgotten or unknown password. A password cracker is a software program that performs one of two functions: a brute force password attack to gain unauthorized access to a system, or recovery passwords stored as a cryptographic hash on a computer system. Your book will tell you more about what a cryptographic hash is on page 82. Keystroke loggers. A keystroke logger is a type of surveillance software or hardware that can record to a log file every keystroke a user makes with a keyboard. The keyboard logger might store the log file locally for later retrieval or send it to a specified receiver. So what is a security breach anyway? In spite of the most aggressive steps to protect computers from attacks, attackers sometimes are going to get through. Any event that results in a violation of any of the confidentiality, integrity, or availability security tenets is a security breach. Some security breaches disrupt system services on purpose. Others are accidental and may result from hardware or software failures. Regardless of whether a security breach is accidental or malicious, it can affect an organization's ability to conduct business as well as affecting the organization's credibility. Here are the activities that cause security breaches, and we're going to cover each one of these. But you have denial of service attacks, distributed denial of service attacks, unacceptable web browsing behavior, wiretapping, use of a backdoor to access resources, and accidental data modifications. So, a denial of service attack results in downtime or inability of a user to access a system. Denial of service attacks impact the availability tenet of the information system security. It is a coordinated attempt to deny service by occupying a computer to perform large amounts of unnecessary tasks. There are two common types of denial of service attacks. You have the logic attacks, which use software flaws to crash or seriously hinder the performance of remote servers. And you have flooding attacks, which overwhelm the victim's computer CPU, memory, or network resources by sending large numbers of useless requests to the machine. One of the best defenses against denial of service attacks is to use intrusion prevention system, or IPSs, which is software devices to detect and stop the attack. Intrusion detection system software and devices can also detect denial of service attacks and alert you when such attacks are in progress. Now, an intrusion detection system will not prevent the attack. It's just going to detect it and then alert you to the attack. Most denial of service attacks target weaknesses in the overall system architecture rather than a software bug or security flaw. Attackers can launch denial of service attacks using common internet protocols such as TCP and ICMP, or Internet Control Message Protocol. A denial of service attack launched through one of these protocols can bring down one or more network servers or devices by flooding it with useless packets and providing false information about the status of network services. This is known as a packet flood. One popular technique for launching a packet flood is a SYN flood. SYN, or SYN, is a TCP control bit used to initialize the TCP/IP communication with another device. Normally, to establish communication, the host receiving the SYN bit immediately responds with both the SYN and the ACK for acknowledge, but the ACK bit, and awaits a confirmation. In a SYN flood, the attacker sends a large number of packets requesting connections to the victim computer. However, the ACK bit is never received. So the victim computer records each request and reserves a place for the connection in a local table in memory. The victim computer then sends a confirmation back to the attacker, but the attacker never acknowledges the confirmation. All these reserved bits of memory are small, but as they accrue, the amount eventually fills the victim's connections table to capacity until it runs out of memory for other operations. Another popular technique is smurfing. The smurf attack uses a directed broadcast to create a flood of network traffic for the victim computer. Now we have distributed denial of service attacks. So this is a type of denial of service attack that also impacts a user's ability to access a system. A distributed denial of service attack, or DDoS, overloads computers and prevents legitimate users from gaining access. They differ from regular denial of service attacks in their scope. In the DDoS attack, attackers hijack hundreds or even thousands of internet computers, planting automated attack agents on these systems. The attacker then instructs the agents to bombard the target site with forged messages. This overloads the site and blocks legitimate traffic. It's very difficult to stop these because they originate from different sources. Next is unacceptable web browsing. A violation of an organization's acceptable use policy, such as an employee's unacceptable web browsing, can itself be a security breach. Organizations should have an acceptable use policy that clearly states what behavior is acceptable and what behavior is not. Unacceptable use can include unauthorized users searching files or storage directories for data and information they are not supposed to read, or users simply visiting prohibited sites. Wiretapping. Attackers can tap telephone lines and data communications lines. Wiretapping can be active, where the attacker makes modifications on the line, Or it can be passive, where an unauthorized user simply listens to the transmission without changing the contents. Passive intrusion can include the copying of data for a subsequent active attack. Two methods of active wiretapping exist. First one is between the lines wiretapping. This type of wiretapping does not alter the messages sent by the legitimate user, but inserts additional messages into the communication line when the legitimate user pauses. The second one is piggyback entry wiretapping. This type of wiretapping intercepts and modifies the original message by breaking the communications line and routing the message to another computer that acts as a host. Next, we have backdoors. Software developers sometimes include hidden access methods called backdoors in their programs. Backdoors give developers or support personnel easy access to a system without having to struggle with security controls. The problem is that backdoors don't always stay hidden. When an attacker discovers a backdoor, he or she can use it to bypass existing security controls such as passwords, encryption, and so on. Data modifications. Data that are purposely or accidentally modified impact the integrity tenet of information system security. This is also considered a security breach. An incomplete modification can occur when multiple processes attempt to update data without observing basic data integrity constraints. Another example is truncating data because the record field is not large enough to hold the complete data. This can occur with most programming languages and can be difficult to detect. However, the results can be significant. The best way to avoid modification issues is to validate data before storing that data and to ensure that your programs adhere to strict data integrity rules. Some additional security challenges include spam and spam, cookies, and hoaxes. Spam is unwanted email. Spam consists of instant messages or IM chats. Most spam and spam are commercial advertising, often for get-rich-quick schemes, dubious products, or other services. Sending spam costs very little because the recipient covers most of the costs associated with spam. It costs money for ISPs and online services to transmit spam. Processing large volumes of unwanted messages is expensive. ISPs transfer these costs directly to subscribers. In addition, spamming forces the receiving user to waste administrative time on cleanup and monitoring of their received messages. Next are hoaxes. A hoax is some act intended to deceive or trick the receiver. In this context, hoaxes normally travel in email messages. Often these messages contain warnings about devastating new viruses. Although hoaxes do not automatically infect systems the way viruses or Trojan horses do, dealing with them is still time consuming. In fact, you may wind up spending much more time disproving hoaxes than handling real viruses and Trojan horse incidents. The best way to handle hoaxes is to ask users not to spread them by forwarding them to others. Finally, are cookies. To help a web server track a user's history, web browsers allow the web server to store a cookie on the user's hard drive. A cookie is simply a text file that contains detail gleaned from past visits to a website. Cookies have value since HTTP is a stateless protocol, one that can't retain data from one visit to the next. So a data file cookie is used to keep a small record of the last visit. Cookies are sometimes controversial because they allow a web server to transmit files to a person's computer for storage on that person's hard drive. Because cookies are text files, though, they generally cannot cause immediate harm. Cookies do not directly perform malicious acts. Cookies cannot spread viruses, nor can they access additional information on users' hard drives. This does not mean that cookies do not pose a security issue, however. Although cookies cannot gather information from a user's hard drive as mentioned, they do sometimes store information that is sensitive, such as credit card details. Let's take a look at some risks, threats, and vulnerabilities. Risks, threats, and vulnerabilities go together. Risk is the probability that something bad is going to happen. A threat is any action that can damage or compromise an asset. And a vulnerability is a weakness in the design or software code itself. A vulnerability that can be exploited is a threat. If a vulnerability exists in a system, so does the possibility of a threat. Any threat against a vulnerability creates a risk that a negative event may occur. You can't eliminate threats, but you can protect against vulnerabilities. That way, even though a threat still exists, it cannot exploit the vulnerability. The key to protecting assets from the risk of attack is to eliminate or address as many vulnerabilities as possible. You can identify threats and rank them according to their importance and impact. You can rank threats by their potential for dollar loss, negative reputation created, monetary liability, or how often they are likely to occur. Each organization may rank a threat higher or lower than another organization does based on its impact to their organization. The most common threats in no particular order include malicious software, hardware software failure, internal attackers, equipment theft, external attackers, natural disasters, industrial espionage, and terrorism. Not all threats are malicious. Although some threats may be intentional, others may be accidental. Accidental threats might include hardware failure or software problems caused by a lack of controls. The result of an accidental threat can be just as damaging as malicious threats. Let's take a look at a few threat types. To secure information, you must protect its confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The three major threat types directly threaten each of the CIA tenets. They are as follows. You have disclosure threats. Disclosure occurs anytime unauthorized users access private or confidential information that is stored on a network resource or while it is in transit between network resources. Disclosure can also occur when a computer or device containing private or confidential information, such as a database of medical records, is lost or stolen. Two techniques that attackers employ to illegally obtain or modify data are as follows. You have sabotage. Sabotage is the destruction of property or obstruction of normal operations. And you have espionage. Espionage is the act of spying to obtain secret information, typically to aid another nation's state. Next, you have alteration threats. An alteration threat violates information integrity. This type of attack compromises a system by making unauthorized changes to data on a system, either intentionally or unintentionally. And finally, you have denial or destruction threats. Denial or destruction threats make assets or resources unavailable or unusable. Any threat that destroys information or makes it unavailable violates the availability tenet of information security. Let's look at what is a malicious attack. An attack on a computer system or network asset succeeds by exploiting a vulnerability in that system. There are four general categories of attacks. An attack can consist of all or a combination of these four categories. First, you have fabrications. Fabrications involve the creation of some deception in order to trick unsuspecting users. Next, you have interceptions. An interception involves eavesdropping on transmissions and redirecting them for unauthorized use. Third are interruptions. An interruption causes a break in communication channel, which blocks the transmission of data. And finally, you have modifications. A modification is the alteration of data contained in transmissions or files. As you've already learned, security threats can be active or passive. Both types can have negative repercussions for an IT infrastructure. An active attack involves a modification of the data system or attempts to gain unauthorized access to computer and networking systems. An active attack is a physical intrusion. In a passive attack, the attacker does not make changes to the system. This type of attack simply eavesdrops on and monitors transmissions. Here are some types of active threats, and each one of these is covered in your book. Birthday attacks, brute force password attacks, dictionary attacks, IP address, hijacking, replay, man in the middle, masquerading, social engineering, phishing, phreaking, and farming. Again, I won't go over each one of these. You can break them down from page 93 to page 98 in your book. Let's look at malicious software. Not all software perform beneficial tasks. Some software infiltrates one or more target computers and follow an attacker's intrusions. These instructions can include causing damage, escalating security privileges, divulging private data, or even modifying or deleting data. This type of software is malicious software, or malware for short. The purpose of malware is to damage or disrupt the system. The effects of malware can range from slowing down a PC to causing it to crash, enabling the theft of credit card numbers, and worse. Simply surfing the internet, reading email, or downloading music or other files can affect a personal computer with malware, usually without the user's knowledge. Malware exists in two main categories: infecting programs and hiding programs. Infecting programs actively attempt to copy themselves to other computers. Their main purpose is to carry out an attacker's instructions on new targets. Malware of this type includes the following. First, you have viruses. A computer virus is a software program that attaches itself to or copies itself into another program on a computer. The purpose of the virus is to trick the computer into following instructions not intended by the original program developers. Users copy infected files from another computer on a network, from a flash drive, or from an online service. Alternatively, users can transport viruses from home and work on their portable computers, which have access to the internet and other network services. A computer virus acts in a similar fashion to a biological virus. It infects the host program and may cause that host program to replicate itself to other computers. The virus cannot exist without a host, and it can spread from host to host in an infectious manner. Next, we have the worm. A worm is a self-contained program that replicates and sends copies of itself to other computers, generally across the network, without any user input or action. The worm's purpose may be simply to reduce network availability by using up bandwidth, or it may take other nefarious actions. The main difference between a virus and a worm is that the worm does not need a host program to infect. The worm is a standalone program. Next, we have Trojan horses. A Trojan horse, also called a Trojan, is malware that masquerades as a useful program. Trojan horse programs use their outward appearance to trick users into running them. They look like programs that perform useful tasks, but actually they hide a malicious code. Once the program is running, the attack instructions execute with the user's permissions and authority. Today's Trojans do far more than just save copies of themselves. They can hide programs that collect sensitive information, open backdoors into computers, or actively upload and download files. The list of possibilities is endless. Rootkits are newer than other types of malware. A rootkit modifies or replaces one or more existing programs to hide traces of attacks. Although rootkits commonly modify parts of an operating system to conceal traces of their presence, they can exist at any level, from a computer's boot instructions up to the applications that run in the operating system. Once installed, rootkits provide attackers with easy access to compromised computers to launch additional attacks. Rootkits exist for a variety of different operating systems, including the Linux, Unix, and Microsoft Windows. Because there are so many different types of rootkits, and because they effectively conceal their existence once installed on a machine, they can be difficult to detect and remove. However, identifying and removing rootkits is crucial to maintaining a secure system. Next is spyware. Spyware is a type of malware that specifically threatens the confidentiality of information. It gathers information about a user through an internet connection without his or her knowledge. Spyware is sometimes bundled as a hidden component of freeware or shareware programs that users download from the internet, similar to a Trojan horse. Spyware can also spread via peer-to-peer file swapping. Once installed, spyware monitors users' activity on the internet. Spyware can also gather information such as email addresses and even passwords and credit card numbers. They can relay these data to the author of the spyware. The author might use the data simply for advertising or marketing purposes, but could employ it to facilitate identity theft. Let's look at some common types of attacks. So depending on the attacker's goal and objectives, many different types of attacks can suit their needs and abilities. These attacks can be summarized into three basic categories. You have attacks on availability. These attacks impact access or uptime to a critical system, application, or data. You have attacks on people. These attacks involve using coercion or deception to get another human to divulge information or to perform an action, like clicking on a suspicious URL link or opening an email attachment from an unknown email address. And finally, you have attack on IT assets. These attacks include penetration testing, unauthorized access, privilege escalation, stolen passwords, deletion of data, or performing a data breach. Let's look at some of the different types of attacks. First, we have social engineering attacks. Social engineering is the art of one human attempting to coerce or deceive another human into doing something or divulging information. Hackers and perpetrators use many different tactics to attempt to social engineer their victims. This slide shows a summary of social engineering attacks that may be used on you or your organization. I'm going to cover some of the basic ones, but there are many more in your book. First is authority. This is using a position of authority to coerce or persuade an individual to divulge information. You have dumpster diving. This is finding unshredded pieces of paper that may contain sensitive data or private data for identity theft. You have hoaxes, creating a con or a false perception in order to get an individual to do something or divulge information. You have impersonation, where they pretend to be someone else, for instance, an IT help desk support person, a delivery person, or a bank representative. You have shoulder surfing, where they're looking over the shoulder of a person typing into the computer screen so they can steal like their password or something like that. You have vishing. This is performing a phishing attack by telephone in order to elicit personal information, using verbal, coercion, and persuasion. That's what's vishing, is verbal or sweet talking the individual under attack. And you have whaling, targeting the executive user or most valuable employees, otherwise considered the whale or the big fish. It's often called spear phishing as well, because you're going to spear a specific target. We also have wireless network attacks. Wireless network attacks involve performing intrusive monitoring, packet capturing, and penetration tests on a wireless network. Here is a summary of some wireless network attacks. You have bluejacking, hacking and gaining control of the Bluetooth wireless communication link between a user's earphone and the smartphone device that is attached to. You have an evil twin. This is faking an open or public wireless network to use a packet sniffer on any user who connects to that network. So don't go into McDonald's or Starbucks and use the open networks. You have an IV attack. This is modifying the initialization vector, that's what IV stands for, of an encrypted IP packet in transition in hopes of decrypting a common encryption key over time. You have packet sniffing, capturing IP packets off a wireless network and analyzing the TCP packet data using a tool such as Wireshark. You have replay attacks, replaying an IP packet stream to fool a server into thinking you are authenticating to it. You have war chalking. This is creating a map of the physical or geographic location of any wireless access points and networks so the bad guys can use them. And war driving is similar, is physically driving around neighborhoods or business complexes looking for wireless access points and networks that broadcast an open or public network connection. So there is no simple measures to protect your organization from computer attacks. You must focus on countermeasures that detect vulnerabilities, prevent attacks, and respond to the effects of successful attacks. That is not easy, but is better than the alternative. Dealing with computer network attacks is a cost of doing business in the IT field. Although smart attackers and intruders continue to invent new methods of attacking computer and network resources, many are well known and can be defeated with a variety of available tools. The best strategy is to identify vulnerabilities and reduce them to avoid attacks in the first place. Avoiding attacks should be the highest priority. Even so, some attacks will succeed. Your response to attacks should be as aggressive, proactive, and reactive as the attack itself. You can respond to attacks by developing plans to rapidly restore computer and network resources if they're attacked. Closing holes in your organization's defenses and obtaining evidence for prosecution of offenders are some of the things you want to do. Of course, you should use the lessons learned from an attack to protect the network from similar attacks later on. Responding to attacks involves planning, policy, and detective work. Fortunately, law enforcement agencies, forensics experts, security consultants, and independent response teams are available to assist you in responding to a security incident as well as prosecuting offenders. As you go through this class, you're going to learn about many countermeasures. To get you started, let's introduce you to a few of the most common countermeasures you can take to protect your IT infrastructure. You may also need to use some of them to respond to threats, vulnerabilities, and malicious attacks in progress. Malware provides a platform for attacks on both personal and business networks. Anti-malware measures are the first line of defense against these attacks. You must take steps to prevent the introduction of malware into your environment. It's always better to prevent malware than to have to fix damage caused by malware. You must develop a security program for preventing malware. On this slide are 6 general steps for preventing malware. First, create an education or information security awareness program to keep your users from installing malware on your system in the first place. Post regular bulletins about malware problems. Number 3, never transfer files from an unknown or untrusted source unless the computer has an anti-malware utility installed. You're going to learn more about anti-malware utilities in just a second. Number 4 is test new programs or open suspect files on a quarantine computer, one that is not connected to any part of your network, before introducing them to the production environment. Number 5 is install anti-malware software. Make sure the software and data are current, and schedule regular malware scans to prevent malicious users from introducing malware and to detect any existing malware. And last is use a secure logon and authentication process. Another important tactic for countering malware is staying abreast of developments in malware. Keep up with the latest malware information by reading weekly computer journals or joining organizations like the National Cybersecurity Alliance or the United States Computer Emergency Readiness Team, or US CERT. Let's talk about protecting your system with firewalls. A firewall is a program or a dedicated hardware device that inspects network traffic passing through it and denies or permits that traffic based on a set of rules you determine at configuration. A firewall's basic task is to regulate the flow of traffic between computer networks of different trust levels. For example, between the LAN to WAN domain and the WAN domain, where the private network meets the public internet. There are numerous firewall protections available. So, in summary, risks, threats, and vulnerabilities in the 7 domains of an IT infrastructure and its assets are an everyday menace. It is essential that organizations and individual users identify their own risks, threats, and vulnerabilities and implement a plan to mitigate those. There are many types of threats. These include confidentiality threats, integrity threats, and availability threats. In addition, there is the threat of a malicious attack. Malicious attacks can originate from active threats that include brute force, masquerading, IP address spoofing, session hijacking, replay, man-in-the-middle, and dictionary password attacks. Passive threats can include eavesdropping and monitoring. Viruses are the most common and frequent type of attack. Anti-malware software is the most effective method of countering a virus attack. The easiest target are users unaware of the security threats. Threat targets are increasing as more users join the internet community. Common targets include computer systems, network components, software, electrical systems, and databases. Black hat hackers, white hat hackers, gray hat hackers, script kiddies, and crackers can launch attacks. All right, that is it for Chapter 3. I'll see you in Chapter 4.